All right, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Enough to Keep Going podcast. This is episode 360. Gentlemen, we have come full circle. I'm your host tonight, DBQ Hams, and I gotta say, after intro music like that, I've had a long week, but I am upbeat, happy to be here, glad to be talking games and the game industry with you gentlemen tonight. Joining me tonight is all three of us. So, Tao Master, how are you, Tao?
I'm doing well. I'm glad the energy's here tonight.
That's right. We'll bring it down here. We'll let GameLogic take the air out of the room and welcome us in.
Was that a request or somebody asked something? I'm sorry.
That's just me being snarky. That's all. So glad to have you here, GameLogic, and thanks for running the boards tonight. As in every week, you keep us flowing and going. So thank you very much. All right, let's go ahead and get started. As we always do here on the Enough to Keep Going podcast, we'll dive into our first segment with our main GX stories, things that we've been playing and what's been our focus for the week. Then we'll dive into news that stood out to us or that we think has some interesting hooks for the industry. And then anything else that's been rounding out our playlist. So GameLogic, thanks for staying on the mic. You've got one that, looking at it, I didn't realize this game came out, but I know the developer and watching some of the video here. So I hope you have some clips because this looks intense, but also potentially a whole lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's kind of an understatement to say like this is special. So this again came out of my normal spelunking, the Open Critic, Metacritic list to look for things that haven't gotten a lot of zeitgeist and a lot of raising up by the media. And so, go ahead and play some gameplay here in the background. Man.
First, we should say what the game is.
Oh, right? Yeah, that's a good point. So this is Echo Point Nova. It is an indie game available, as far as I know, only on Steam. It's and therefore only on PC. It came out on September 24th, 2024. DBQ, you want to brief a little bit about the developer? Because I'm not familiar with the developer.
Yeah, so the developer is Severed Steel, which I'm pretty sure I have in my library here. Let me just pull up a few other things about it. So Severed Steel was, again, a first-person kind of... a lot of neon, but again, a very fast first-person shooter, but also all PvE. It was all against the computer. It was a lot of time trial aspects, but flowed incredibly well. So it was something that both my son and I played. Very kind of fast, hyper neon. It was correct. Greylock Studios came out in 2021. A lot of it was almost like little challenge rooms, little puzzle rooms. It was very much in kind of a puzzle combat-y type of way. But the combat really flowed. It had a lot of movement and energy to it, which I think we're seeing here in this clip as well.
Yeah,
I mean, this is their next game, right?
Yeah. And it's a good thing that you mentioned neon. I'm not sure. Were you trying to make reference to Neon White?
No, but I think that this feels like it. No, the neon color palette was very much in Severed Steel. Yes. Okay,
gotcha. Well, I'm glad that because I've been trying to put my finger on, feelings that this game evokes. And, I was kind of meandering around with with Mirror's Edge, but I feel like I've been calling references to Mirror's Edge like every other week for the last 3 months. And I was like, I don't think that's quite it. But then you mentioned Neon, and that made me think of Neon White, and that is a thing that this makes me think of. And Neon White was a shooter, but it was a time trial based shooter with movement, though very similar to this, in some similar mechanics, but not as highly combat oriented. You would have, like, on your path, on your run, you would have, 1Z, 2Z, maybe 3 at most enemies that you would run into. But this is a little bit more kind of arena style. And so you go up and you activate these scans, right? These little billboards. And the billboards will start a wave, almost kind of like a little like mini horde mode session. As you can see, the enemies spawning here. The enemies are of different types. They also get more complex as time goes on. So
this is PvE still, right? It's not PvP?
This is PvE. There is co-op in this game, which I haven't gotten into. I'll probably do just a full run on my own. But when you think about the co-op possibilities, it really kind of opens up the aperture on the potential of the experiences, because you can go up to each one of these scans and hit them multiple times. So it gives some opportunity for tons of replay and just kind of going, scan to scan. You can also find these scans on ways that are not necessarily on your beaten path of the objectives that you're trying to accomplish. So, and you can go back, right? There's I don't think you'll see me pull it up, but there is a map, and so it kind of makes me think of like maps in the way that they are in roguelites, where when you think of like Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, right? You get exposure to the maps, and you can go back to different areas and things like that. So like I said, the enemies get more complex. So they started off just like regular infantry guys. Actually, none of the enemies that you're seeing right now were kind of there at the start. These kind of lighter weight mercenary types have kind of shown up later, but you see some of them are now on hoverboards, which is what I'm on when you see me sprinting and moving fast.
Little red and black is a hoverboard then?
Yes.
Underneath your weapon? Okay.
Yep. And that figures much more prominently into the game. There is pretty intensive platforming in between the horde mode sessions. Now, right now, I've just slowed down time. When you saw like everybody slow down and me scoping in on that guy. And so there is a perk that I've gained where you can fill up your adrenaline meter, which is down there in the lower left-hand corner. And then that allows you to slow down time.
Definitely some mechanics there with the grapple and the slowdown that are in Severed Steel.
Yes, yeah.
Really create this sense of movement and speed.
Yeah, it's actually to the point where speed is actually a detriment. You kind of have to consciously, much in the same way as what was the game that I was just talking about?
Neon White.
No, I Am Your Beast.
Yes.
That I was just talking about last week, where you can move so quickly that you kind of lose track of like enemies and where people are and like what exactly you should be doing, and very frequently because of the platforming aspects, like the surface that I'm on, the territory that I'm on, you can see in the background there are other like floating components. Like this is I'm not on a continent, right? It's a bunch of islands. It's an archipelago basically in the sky, and so the intensive traversing sections, platforming sections in between this are, and you could see the gold arrow pointing where I need to get over there. There's like no land. Like I'm going out to look at it now. I apologize for our audio listeners, but like, see, the other thing is there's like no land between me and where I need to get to. So now I'm scanning around. A lot of
individual islands that you're trying to maneuver between.
Yeah, and so you have to do a combination of like, using the hoverboard, using a double jump, which you eventually get, and using the grappling hook to figure out, where things are. And it's constantly looking out over the abyss. The grappling hook works on clouds, by the way, so you have to keep an eye out for clouds that you can hook into. And so it's just constantly, and as I pop up to the top of this tree, I have no idea what's on the other side of this tree. When I pop out of the top, like I'm hoping there's an island or something for me to jump to. But it's just very, and the movement is so, like, you have so much momentum that like every time you land, unless you're landing on like a massive component of land, you just have no idea, whether or not you're going to fly off the edge. So you're constantly doing this, back and forth where you're trying to, jockey your momentum to get yourself slowed down. Like I just threw a grenade and it just blasted me off the island, like, which I didn't know it was going to do. So I had to react right to that. So, super interesting. You see there's holes and stuff through the middle of the island that you'll fall through if you're not watching what you're doing. So like I said, the platforming is fairly intense. You get a myriad of weapons. So I think, anywhere from, 6 to 9 different weapons. And it seems like I'm still constantly finding more. By the way, you also have a melee weapon. So you find a pickaxe, which you can also use. You have grenades. This weapon that I'm holding right now is actually a grenade launcher. So on top of the thrown grenades that you have. Yeah. So again, when I took off there just to traverse that chasm, I had no idea, right, that I was going to find like the thing, I'm reacting to things in midair to make the traversal. So combat, I'm like super happy with. Unlike most games, including I would even say Call of Duty, there isn't a pretty effective, I think, ballistics model where you do have to lead your targets. You can't just like point at them in the pistol in the round, mystically transits from weapon to impact point, instantaneously. Particularly when you're firing like the sniper rifle, like at very long distances. You can, however, fire these weapons at some like incredibly long distances and ping somebody, right? The damage is reduced, the further away that you are, but if you line your sights up right, you can pull that off. So yeah, I'm like incredibly satisfied. This was a $20 game on Steam. It's not supposed to be that long. It's supposed to be about 5 hours. I've played probably about 2.5 into it so far.
It's a finite experience. It's not a roguelike run-based type of thing. You've got set levels that you're maneuvering through, or are they procedurally generated?
Well, so it's not roguelite in the main. I think as I look at some of these things and some of the areas, like I think there is some procedural generation going on here. I'm not absolutely certain. There is one section. So when you get into like So I went through all this. I think during this gameplay segment, I got to like a major outpost takedown kind of area. And the way that worked is if you died while you were assaulting the base, you would respawn back outside at the beginning. However, when I entered the base, it didn't respawn all those enemies. So for quite honestly, I don't even really know from a design aspect why it spawned me back out, like why you would bother spawning the person back outside the base without like forcing them to redo the enemies. But that was one thing, and it caused me a little bit of trepidation when I spawned back outside the base. I was like, man, if I go back in here and all these guys are respawned, I'm gonna be really, really salty. But that was not the case. But yeah, ton of weapons. You get some perks. Like I said, the one perk that I've gotten so far was adrenaline. Oh, and then I have another one that's a ground pound. So you can jump up and come down and like smash your fist into the ground like superhero style, and cause a shockwave that'll take some enemies out. I've used that only a couple times. It doesn't feel like it's a particularly effective power. But like the story is just kind of standard dystopian. I think you're on this planet trying to hunt down like these mercenaries who have been concocting plans for world domination or whatever. So it's very cookie cutter.
This is a playground for speed and movement more than it is a narrative experience.
Yep, absolutely. So yeah, I'm having a ton of fun with this.
Question on you. Yeah. As you're going through with the hoverboard or is there momentum? Do you pick up speed with that, or do you start off at the same speed? Like looking through these floating platforms, do you need to build up speed as a running start in order to get places, or is it pretty much a consistent speed once you start the hoverboard?
No, you definitely can use some broom. So I mean, it's very minor and almost undetectable because the band, right, of ballistic movement is pretty wide. So, but like just a few moments ago when you saw me where I didn't like back all the way up and take off, I took off at a very short distance. That caused me to barely get to that island, and I actually had to grapple, right, to make sure that I crossed like that last final like few feet. So that it will be in difference to like when you back up and get a running start, right? So there's kind of very minor differences. I will say, like, every time I'm going to traverse open space, it's constantly like a ballistic calculation of like, am I backing up the right distance? Do I need to do a big running start right here? It's all a guessing game. And in many ways, where it is similar to Mirror's Edge, because you're in a situation like I am now, where I'm like I'm down to 1 heart of health. When that happens and you just move, which I didn't do there, but when you just move and you're not thinking, and there's this flow, and you're emergently reacting to things, that's when the game like feels best, right? It also causes the highest level of anxiety, and so it's not necessarily pleasant. But that is when the game is kind of at its best.
Yeah, this looks. I mean, I could see where coordinating this with a group of players could be a whole lot of fun in terms of the movement and the potential kind of flanking in different paths that people could take. The severed steel was all internal environments, a lot of like black walls. It was very minimalist, while this is low poly, it is such a kind of brighter, expansive game and really invites that flow of movement that you've been talking about.
Yeah, and I think the most enjoyable thing, and it's kind of unfortunate that there'll only be like this one playthrough. So in this sequence, I enter. Let me see. So you exit. So this was the main like base that I assaulted, right? And so I'm trying to figure out how to get out now. I'm trying to get to, and so I go through these caves, and I eventually get to this big vertical section, which I'm in now, and as I'm going through here, I'm trying to figure out, I have to. It's just a big vertical stovepipe, so I'm trying to figure out how to grapple. There's half platforms on the way up, and I'm like, and the whole way there's no enemies here, right? So I'm trying to figure this thing out. I'm like, why am I bothering doing this? And then you get to the top and you find one of these scans, and so as you see what I was saying, the enemies become more complicated here, because first there were just these guys that I just killed, like these kind of big tubby guys. They're big targets. They don't move that very quickly. And then they added these like mercenaries who are a little quicker, and so therefore a little deadlier. Then, like you saw on the last board, they added the guys with the hoverboards. Now, as you see on this one, now they have jetpacks. And that like completely took me out. Like when I got to the top of this thing and started the Horde, I was like, wait, these guys have jetpacks now? And so then I'm killing them off. I think you see in the upper right-hand corner, right, there's a ticker. And so when you start the scan, which is the Horde mode wave, it'll say, you need to kill 20 enemies or whatever. And so I took those guys out. There's also pretty good spatial audio in this. Like you'll hear the enemies. So I'm sitting up there up top, and I'm like, oh man, this is going to be crappy. Like these guys are all going to, come at me in this really enclosed space. There's this big chasm in the middle of the map. I'm going to have to watch where I'm going. And then only just one guy with the jetpack comes out, and I'm like, well, what am I supposed to, like, what am I waiting on? Is it going to now suddenly start sending them at me like one at a time? And then I hear these guys, and I'm like, where are these guys? And then you saw, I looked over the edge, and I'm like, that whole vertical traversal that I just did, these guys have all spawned back down there. So now I've got to go back down and hit these guys in waves. So, there are some fairly surprising like combat scenarios, right, that the thing throws at you. And then of course when I'm in here, I'm like, I had to grapple like all the way. This is going to be a big like grapple Horde session or whatever, as far as the primary tactic I'm going to have to use. Really tight and closed space, and in tight and closed spaces, these guys do hit you and kind of quickly take you down. As you can see, the life meter, you can only take 5 hits, right? So yeah, I'm having a great time with this. It's super interesting. Very much. You mentioned in their previous game, there was a lot of kind of puzzly aspect to it. I mentioned that last week too with I Am Your Beast, and the same is kind of true here, right? There's geometry, there's geography that all kind of combine to make a particular combat scenario, in kind of how you have to handle yourself and what options are available, and what combat tactics you want to employ. and those play into each of these horde mode waves that you start. And so there's a certain kind of puzzle aspect in terms of, what is the most effective means that you're going to potentially have to take these guys down.
That's great. And so again, this developer is Greylock Studios. Tao, any questions follow up?
Yeah, I had a few questions. So for the weapons, so do you have to pick up ammo? It looked like I think you were picking up ammo. I can't tell because everything's moving so fast.
Yeah, there are ammo pickups here, and so I think they do this as to help you out because of speed. You can kind of see where there are going to be ammo drops already on the screen, like they're there where these things are ghosted out white, and then I guess as you kill enemies or whatever, they go solid, they go gold, right, and then you can pick them up. So you kind of have an idea where extra ammo is on the screen and where health is going to spawn on the screen. That does you absolutely no good because like it's not like I remember where that stuff is. But yes, you do ammo pickups. I forget what game it was that I was playing recently. It was a AAA game. As people who are watchers of the show know, one of my biggest pet peeves is I personally feel like in a shooter, don't bother me with forcing me to like hit a button to pick up ammo or to do an animation where I like kneel down and pick up ammo. I'm like, that doesn't make me more immersed in the game. Like I just know that it negatively impacts, right, my ability to maneuver and handle myself in combat. And when it's just like germane and I'm just going from point A to point B, it doesn't add anything to the game. So kudos to this game, and thank goodness for this game for just having you just run over ammo, right, and having it restock your supply. I have not at this point run out of ammo of a particular weapon. There's definitely reloads, and as you can see, with combat being as quick as it is, you will definitely get yourself in a bad situation. If you're engaged with an enemy and then all of a sudden, you've got to reload. So generally, which is normally my primary shtick in almost every shooter, whenever I run out of a magazine and the character goes into the reload animation, I swap weapons instead of completing the reload. And then, eventually I'll come back around to a cycle where I'm going to have to reload every time I switch weapons, and that's fine. But at least that allows me to get through like that initial combat loop with every single weapon using, each magazine for each weapon. But that's just me. But yeah, like I said, having a really good time with it.
That's great. I didn't even realize this was out there. So go ahead. Sorry to step on what you were going to say, Tao.
Oh, no problem. Just two more quick questions. Is the tether or the grappling hook, whatever you want to call it, is there a cooldown to it, or can you just like throw it out like as many times as you want?
There is a cooldown when you miss. So I'm not absolutely certain. I know that there is some type of cooldown that trips for something. You'll see. I don't know. It's been up a couple times in this gameplay video where you've seen like a white circle, like on top of the, encircling the crosshairs, and then you see it wind down on a cooldown. I'm not sure if that's when you miss or right after you successfully grapple. I know that I hit it when I try and fire the grapple and miss, and then I'm trying to refire, right, because I'm falling and I'm trying to find the right surface. The one thing that's a little aggravating is the grapple connects to every type of surface, but it seems like there are something, I don't know, edges, or when you're trying to hit it at a surface at a certain angle, where it won't connect. And then that's when it seems like it goes down into that cooldown. And then, like I said, that's typically in a scenario where I'm falling through the sky and I'm trying to desperately find something to clamp back onto. But it seems to not be about. I will say, I also, as far as I know, I don't think that I tend to like grapple, and I haven't really been put in that tactical situation. So it may just be like a normal cooldown, and I don't understand that it actually triggers every single time because I don't use it in that way.
And then one last thing. I'm assuming there's no fall damage. It didn't look like there was.
I don't think there is. I will say in most cases, I do the Destiny 2 thing where, just moments before impacting the ground, I'll hit jump, right, to slow down my fall. But in one case, I did just drop down and didn't do that, and didn't take any damage. But I was also not as high up as I've been in some other cases, so I'm not absolutely certain.
Yeah, given the landscape and the speed, I would think we would have seen some fall damage here. So, and it also it allows the player to have a sense of movement and freedom. Where if you're worried about fall damage, you might be a little more hesitant in some of those riskier jumps that you're taking.
Yeah, I will say what seems to be the case. They seem to say there was a little pop up that came up while I was playing earlier that said your suit protects you from your own explosions. So on a couple of occasions, I have fired that grenade launcher, and it seems like I didn't take any damage, although I did get pushback. So I got thrown out of the blast radius, but I didn't seem to take any damage. But I'm not relying on that entirely, because I would say it seems like there's been other times that I have taken damage before I got the grenade launcher, just from regular grenades. There are also exploding barrels here that you can use to take soldiers out in a AOE type of attack. So like I said, there's been a tutorial that's popped up that says the suit protects me from damage, but I'm not taking that as gospel.
Sounds good. Well, thanks for highlighting this. It came out in September. This game from a smaller studio, and again, something else. It's great to have some of these smaller games on our radar. Appreciate it. Hero Down Under and an 8. Thanks for joining us in the chat tonight. Appreciate that. I have spent my week not necessarily playing a game, but reading about games. So I made my way through Jason Schreier's most recent book, The Play Nice, The Rise, Fall, and Future of Blizzard Entertainment. Anybody listening to video game podcasts in the last 3 weeks probably heard Jason Schreier on their podcast, because he made a whole lot of press rounds, it seems like. I think I heard 4 different versions of his press tour through the gaming podcast cycle. This game, I've read Jason Schreier's previous books, the ones kind of dealing with individual game development and kind of the struggles of games. This one is really focused only on Blizzard, and eventually it starts to focus on Activision as well, as we get into the Activision Blizzard King era. It was a quick, easy, kind of churn through. It's written in such a way that it's easy to consume. It is written in such a way that it's approachable to not just a game audience, but to kind of anybody. And I think in some ways that left me wanting more, because we have, because we follow this as closely as we do. There were definitely times with some of the older game developments, or even the newer stuff that we've covered here on this podcast, that it doesn't go into nearly the amount of depth that I would hope. But I also understand the realities of the publishing world, and I am not necessarily the major use case of this book in terms of the audience. I'm going to buy this no matter what. And hearing Jason talk about it on some of the other podcasts that he was on, it was multiple hundreds of pages more than what it ultimately ended up being, right? He edited down over 100 and some pages in order to get it into its final form. It was really interesting, because I did not really follow Blizzard until probably the early 2000s, shortly after Diablo 2. And so to hear and read about some of kind of Blizzard's initial history and their kind of port work, and we know some of their games because they've been collected, like Lost Vikings and Blackthorn and Rock and Roll Racing, but they were doing a number of different ports, and the development there, and kind of just in general, their history of never really being independent. Even if they may have felt independent, they always had parent studios. Whether, before Activision, it was Vivendi. Before then, they were first bought back in the early days of their studio by a education game company that plopped down $7 million for them. And, to hear some of their early stage of development, I think that made it really interesting because those are stories that I didn't know before. I have David Craddock's 2 books on Diablo 1 and Diablo 2, where he kind of goes through an oral history of those. And those go into a whole lot more deep development around Blizzard North. But this book kind of, it doesn't, you get a chapter, you get a couple chapters around it at different points in time, but you do get kind of that history of the aspect of kind of the haves and have-nots, or the second tier of Blizzard North versus Anaheim and the main Blizzard studio as they were acquired in. So it was interesting to kind of go through that aspect of Blizzard's history. Once we get into the modern era, for the last almost 10 years at this point, gentlemen, we've been talking about video game news on a podcast or another. And, Blizzard and its lawsuits and all the other acquisitions definitely have made a cycle here. So in some ways, I don't really feel like I gained a lot out of the last section of the book because it's stuff that I had already known, right? Like but there were pieces there that did add a little more flavor or a little more background of things and analysis. The kind of story around Bobby Kotick and Activision's purchase was interesting as well. So again, if you enjoy kind of the behind the scenes aspects of different companies, or you've enjoyed Blizzard's games and want to know a little bit more of the history of that company, this is a nice kind of, I don't know, casual audience read, right? This is not going to be a scholarly or industry related retelling. It's written at an audience that is going to pick this up for a gift for a gamer, for somebody in their family, or it's something that is easy to pick up and read and put back down. It does not require any type of existing prior knowledge around the game industry or Blizzard itself. So it's written for an intro audience.
Yeah, actually, I thought it sounded familiar because I heard I think it was Podcast Unlocked from IGN. He was on there doing his spiel there. So, yeah, sounded interesting.
So DBQ, just to re-articulate your takeaway. So your takeaway is people who are domain experts and are people like us who follow the industry, are deeply rooted in the industry, read the news every day, have talked about it, right? For like as you mentioned. I think total time we're actually, if you go all the way back to casual adult gamers, it's been almost 20 years. But you're like, for us, you may want to just like wait to see how much of this gets posted right online, or pick it up in a bargain read or something as a Kindle book or something like that. But it's not really written for us. It's written for people who are a little less steeped. You think?
I mean, I that's a hard one to say, because I think even if you're steeped in it, if you're steeped in the entire history of Blizzard, awesome, right? Like for me, I may be steeped in the last 15 years of Blizzard, but not necessarily in the first 20 some. So I learned a whole lot. I got a lot more out of the 90s Blizzards and the 2000 Blizzard, the build up and kind of launch and scaling of World of Warcraft, and the problems that created in terms of kind of company infrastructure and support, and the expectations that it led to in terms of finances. I think that those things were new to me, right? Like I saw in some ways, like even if I may feel very confident in a lot of the more recent stuff. I learned a whole lot in the places where I hadn't been exposed to before. So yeah, I think it's, I think it was on sale on Amazon for under $20. It was an easy pickup. There's an audiobook of it as well. I'm sure your local library is going to probably have both it, the audible version of it as well. So it was one where, yeah, I if you've been following, I think, so I will say this as well. I'm going to take this in a tangent. If you've read Jason Schreier's other books, I think that this is the most accessible of the ones that he's made. I also think it's the one that has the least of a kind of personal angle to grind, axe to grind to some degree. Like the last book was definitely published around the rise of kind of focusing on development crunch and the questions around that. This, this is very much a chronicling of a history of a studio. And so it doesn't necessarily, it's not weaving a narrative that is trying to, even though there are multiple narratives there, right? Like there are narratives about the more recent, acquisitions and revelations that have come out about Blizzard's history. But even by the nature of how he tells the story and by the nature of kind of the long view, it's not, it's a lot more nuanced of a history as really anything is, right? Like in the moment, the headlines may seem salacious, but over the course of things, they're put into perspective in a way that doesn't diminish them, but also doesn't make them the kind of, the fulcrum of what he's trying to get across in this book.
So that segment right there is a thread of redemption, because I am not a huge fan of Jason Schreier. I'd actually say my feelings of him are much more caustic than just not being a fan. And often it has been because of exactly what you like pin the tail on the donkey about, which is that the stuff that he's written before, I mean, always has a narrative, always has an agenda, right? Always has a personal, like, sensationalist, like, thing he's trying to pick at, right? And I've often felt like they aren't, I mean, we talked about this when we talked about the whole BioWare thing, right? I felt like this was not that was not a like 360-degree perspective. It was, I'm trying to pin the tail on a donkey on a thing, and I'm going to get access to and interview the people that are going to help me tell that story, right? The story was written before the research was done. But it sounds like this is an arc to kind of come off of that a little bit and do, what I frequently advocate that journalism is supposed to be, which is it's supposed to be laying out facts, right? It's supposed to be, like you're saying, a historical research paper, and then, maybe he closes out each section with a paragraph of like his own assessment of what that means. But in general, you write the history and then you let the reader come to their own conclusions. So it sounds like, yeah, it's maybe a step in the right direction for him.
No, I mean, I think it would have been very easy for any author to kind of take this. It would have been easy to sell this and to write it as a hit piece, given all the other stuff that has been going on around Blizzard's history. But it is very much like an understanding of the problematic, but also the accomplishments that they've done, and it is in some ways. I really appreciate it because it is such a holistic view that even the people that have been, that have had the lawsuits around them and the allegations, that they're complex people, and that's gone into it. It is not simply just highlighting the most recent kind of headline grabbing aspects, and also the people that have in the fandom have got the most praise out of Blizzard. There's also complexities to them in terms of their, priorities, management, personal, it felt very, felt very grounded to some degree, right? Like it could have been different. And in some ways I was expecting it to be different because of the last 5 years of reporting. but I really appreciated kind of the perspective and the scope there as well. So we got a couple. Nate in the chat talks about some of the challenges, and I think this is a challenge, and not just of Jason Schreier, right? But in terms of the ability that we have to interact with journalists, with potential authors, that we have that ability, we have access in ways that we wouldn't necessarily have had access to before. And by knowing somebody else's previous work, and this goes to what I was saying, like understanding his previous work also it made, and as you said, Game, like it may taint and color what your expectations are. And I feel like this is one where it is, I don't want to use the word fair, right? But it is.
Sounds like you're saying more measured and even-handed. It's kind of what makes me think,
right? Like it is. It's a history more than it is a kind of a narrative thesis that is trying to be woven. Yep. All right. Well, let's move on from talking about a game journalist writing to what is making game journalists write this week. So, GameLogic, why don't you stay on the mic here? And you've got actually, we've been talking about California laws and whether we own things, and now we have a FTC statement here.
Yep. So this article over on PC Perspective by Jeremy Hellstrom. So is that Hellstrom, son of Satan, or also former Avenger? But maybe I have him mistaken. Like I said, this
story appropriate for the middle of October.
Like I said, this story over on PC Perspective. The FTC makes click to cancel a thing in the U.S. You may have noticed a trend towards making it difficult to cancel your subscription services, assuming you can keep track of them. Many online services force you to jump through a number of hoops to cancel a subscription with them, often with an unhelpful chatbot as the only way to request the cancellation. There are also a large number of services that might offer a discounted or free trial period, after which you are immediately signed up for their full cost of services. So that latter piece is actually really interesting. I don't see anything in here that says that there would necessarily be any relief for that, other than just presenting, a very simple click to cancel, which still requires you to go back to the free trial that you started an account with and actually click to cancel, which is most people's fallacy, which is a thing that I miss, right? You start the counter on the free trial, and then you forget to check to turn it off, which with a month-to-month subscription isn't that bad. The things that are bad is when it rolls over into something that has like a 1 year or 2 year commitment. But the big thing that this targets is it's just the fact that it's just hard to cancel. And quite honestly, while this is up kind of making the rounds in the gaming circles because of gaming subscriptions, not just Game Pass, but EA Play and Uplay or Ubi Plus or whatever it is.
Whatever Ubisoft's calling it this.
Yeah. As well as other subscription services, GeForce Now, etc. Where I really hope this lands is with the stinking cell phone carriers, because I have, I provide, all the cell phones for my whole family, and for me to it aggravates me to no end that I'm I just want to I have a bunch of lines with you guys. I just want to cancel one line, right? I'm not leaving the service. You're still getting a significant amount of money from me every month. You've given me the right as the admin to manage all of these lines. I should just be able to cancel one very easily by clicking. I shouldn't have to even talk to a bot. So that's a bit of a rant on my end. But the point of this is that when you're subscribed to Game Pass, when you're subscribed to PlayStation Plus, you should be able to go in and disenroll. It's also, to me, in a lot of ways, it's not really super cool that there's really not a cancel my subscription, even, right? It's typically, you typically have to log into the account on the web. So you have to go to your administrative back end. It's not actually in an app somewhere generally. And then you have to swim through, find where this account is. It's a fairly new thing that companies like even Amazon have and Apple and Google Play have a subscription section, which now fortunately they do. But you go into that, and it's not even like a cancel your subscription. It's that you have to take off the auto renew. So it's a little like not super intuitive, and I think it's deliberately that way, like so that somebody's looking around for the cancel my subscription line text, and it doesn't say that, So, but hopefully this will make it easy. It will make you have to not porpoise down, 3 or 4 levels into your account settings to figure out how to turn off these things. So yeah, I mean, I think this is a plus. I've commented over the last couple months. The chairman of the European Commission, who I think made a run at some other position in Europe and didn't get elected to that, is due to retire out of that position. I want to say at the end of the year. And I think there's one other official who's in kind of the regulatory space in the EU. And there's all this like cheerleading and hand waving, about like these people have made things hard. Most of those people seem to be like rabid Apple fans, and so they have their noses twisted in a bunch because a lot of the stuff has kind of hit Apple squarely in the wallet. Apple's being sued over there for alleged basically tax evasion and collusion with Ireland, which if you're in the U.S., we know that they were already being drug up for stuffing a bunch of money over in Ireland that many in the U.S. and government claimed should have been taxable income for the U.S. But quite honestly, when you look at the European Commission's track record as far as things that they have done for the consumer versus what the FTC has been able to do, I would contend that over the last 5 to 10 years, like European consumers have had their constituents' interests much more so championed than we have had in the U.S. And quite frankly, like we're all benefiting from things that regulatory environment has driven. Things like forcing open Apple Store, which I think definitely fed into the decision here in the U.S. to force the Google Store open. And look, I get that there are negatives for that, but we've existed under the regime that Apple dictated for 17 years. So I think it's okay, right, for there to be a slight change. And these things are always subject to go back. I think there's actually verbiage written into the Digital Rights Act or whatever it is for it to actually be revisited, like in 4 or 5 years or something like that. So I think this is a good thing that the FTC has been able to pull off, and hopefully there's more of this stuff on the way. I don't know. What are your guys' feelings on it?
Yeah, it's kind of funny that this came up because I just not a video game subscription, but I had a trial for Audible. I think it was like a month trial or something that I had just canceled. I completely forgot about it. I never even used it because I completely forgot I had it. But I always do a reminder for myself in my calendar for these things because I know I'll forget. Like obviously I just did. And I went through the process, and I had to click through like 5 or 6 different prompts, like, hey, do you want to cancel? Sure, you want to cancel. Here's a promotion you can stay on for less money, and I was like, no, cancel. Then he gave me some other like promotion or whatever. So it just kind of kept pain in the butt. So, and they did email me, but I mean, I don't really. I try not to check my emails too often anymore, like once a week maybe, if even that, and it's just mostly junk. But it was the calendar reminder that really saved me on this one. So and just going through and doing all the clicks. And the one thing from the article too, and you had mentioned this about the auto renew thing, which would have happened. I would have started getting charged. It said in the email, it was like, yeah, it's fine that they're not forced, like kind of forced to contact the customer. But I mean, like I said, like someone they're probably just going to send an email out, which maybe most people might just dismiss because these companies are always sending emails about just other things about the service themselves, so people might not notice it. It's like, oh, it's just another Audible, or it's just another whatever service you happen to have. So I mean, that's kind of nice, but it's still it's it is what it is, I suppose. But like so my suggestion, do those calendar entries. Make yourself a reminder so you remember to cancel these things, because like literally, yeah, I've had that problem in the past, and I was like, you know what, I know I'm going to forget, so I'm just going to start doing calendar like 2 or 3 days before it's going to renew. I'll just cancel it. So but yeah, I mean, it's a good thing though that they're doing this now for everybody.
Yeah, I think the simplification of how many times it takes you to say yes, you want to cancel is beneficial. So
Yeah, I mean, I think along with it's like eventually I'm hoping we get to some type of anti-nag legislation or rule. Like I just, I'm making this transition over to iOS devices right into the Apple ecosystem. And like in ordering, and I had to order 2 phones, 2 lines to put it on an iPhone. And like I was constantly being nagged by the bot. Like, oh, I can help you make this purchase. I'm like, dude, I don't need any help. I just need you to leave me alone so I can get through this process and get these things on order.
but then they get you. That's, All right. GameLogIQ, go ahead and stay on here with another news story. We've talked about Certain Affinity just, I think, the other week when Halo Studios rebranded, or when 343 rebranded as Halo Studios, and now Certain Affinity is back in the news.
Yeah, so let's start our Xbox segment, which is liable to go on for a good 10 or 15 minutes because we got a few things to cover on that platform. This story over on Game Developer. So for people who are not familiar, this is the site that used to be called Game of Sutra. And I think people don't entirely understand is when we talk about GDC, this is the key component, right, organization behind GDC. So they actually changed the name of the website to be synonymous with the conference. And it's actually now just gamedeveloper.com. But these are the guys who run GDC. Game Developer, like I said, story over on Game Developer by Justin Carter. Keywords set to acquire Halo and Exodus codev Certain Affinity. Global service provider Keywords has made a play to acquire famous support studio Certain Affinity for an unknown sum. Under the deal, Certain Affinity will quote bring a wealth of knowledge, experience, and expertise to our creative division, said Keyword CEO Bertrand Bodson. Founder and CEO Max Hoberman and President Paul Sams will still lead the developer. So Keywords, as far as I've been able to tell, and so just one other thing, just differences in perspective around the industry and kind of who's who in the zoo and where people are. They talk about Certain Affinity being famous. I quite honestly didn't know about Certain Affinity until like this generation, and quite honestly, I think a lot of people have become aware of Certain Affinity as the feelings and perception of 343 and how they've handled the Halo franchise have been on the decline. I feel like that's when Certain Affinity kind of really came into the conversation because they were known as being a studio that, was really they had really in the past kind of bolstered and helped 343 in their management of the franchise.
They did some Destiny 1 support in PvP maps as well. And that's where I ran into them at first, was with the Destiny community.
Yep. So I think the most closely linked story that we've heard in recent history is how there was a battle royale mode being worked on for Halo Infinite, and then that was canceled, and we've seen assets showing up in Halo Infinite that we think are being launched for the game, and that we also now think came out of this effort that was going on from Certain Affinity that has been canceled. What I've speculated also is that it was this deal that was in the works that also played into that decision. It could be that the Battle Royale was canceled much earlier, but this could also be a situation analogous to Nintendo, where they recently acquired a support studio who had done work for them in the past that was also being shopped. And the theory is that Nintendo went after them because they were like, look, if these guys get picked up and acquired by someone else, we have no guarantee that the work that they do for us is going to be the priority. And so that's going to put us in the position of either we're now going to have to potentially.
Sony did that with whoever their
Nix's Blue Point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So look, I mean, this is one of the things that we talk about in acquisitions where, there are acquisitions that are a game of keep away. That like, hey, we don't want them being purchased. We're going to buy them because we don't want them being purchased by somebody else. But it's good news for Certain Affinity, who I think, again, just whatever's been going on with 343 and Halo. I don't know that it was necessarily charting the best future for them. I think as far as I've been able to tell, Keyword Studios is basically, they're a little bit more than like a support organization. I mean, they are a support organization, but they're a support organization in multiple avenues of of digital production in the market. So I think of them kind of almost as more like a game industry version of kind of Industrial Light and Magic. So they offer like several different value streams of services that they provide for, you know, they're not a production company themselves. I mean, and maybe another analogy for those who are old is they kind of remind me of Bass F. You know, they don't make music, but they make your music sound good. So you know, so Certain Affinity is going to go there and play a fairly decent role, I expect. Maybe not as prestigious as working on, you know, Destiny 2, and Halo. Maybe not as publicly visible, but you know, but in a world where, you know, survival has become more so the name of the game in the gaming industry, you know, the best thing out of it is that, you know, it's a steady paycheck, right, coming in for the next foreseeable future.
Nice. Tao, any thoughts there? Or are you ready to talk about some game announcements from Xbox?
I had a question and now I lost the thought as I was looking up something else. So they've keywords. This is their first studio, I guess if you want to call it, like development studio that they own, correct? Or they've bought it. I was trying to look real quick, but I couldn't really find anything as far as any other development studios if they've acquired.
I think this is the from the brief time that I spent looking at it, I think this is the only, you know, subordinate division that I would say is as close to user facing game development as these guys are. I think they have other shops that will do audio, and they have other shops that will do marketing, and so they have other shops who will do components of games, but not necessarily like, you know, actually, you know, outsource, you know, somebody who's been a person who's outsourced scope where they've said, hey, this is a module or a mode in the game, the whole thing is yours, go do it. So it's the most kind of integrated service organization that I think they brought in from a video games perspective.
Okay, cool. All right, so yeah, I'll jump on the next story here. Xbox had their partner showcase. Seems like everybody's kind of splitting off all of their directs and stuff now. So this is all like kind of third-party stuff that they showed off this past week, which I didn't even know about it until like the day before when I saw an announcement. I think on one of the Discords I was on, or someone had posted it. So like usual, I'll just kind of pick a few things that I kind of found interesting through the direct here. First one up is Mouse PI for hire. Excuse me. Kind of this old school, almost kind of Cuphead animation, but it's a first person shooter. So it has that old kind of like I think it's all black and white if I remember correctly. That you're kind of just doing, you know, you're a mouse detective, doing a case. So I thought it was kind of pretty interesting. The animation was
announced. Cool. It's been announced before, but this was kind of the first bigger trailer that we get from it.
Yeah, I don't know if they showed gameplay before. I can't remember. If they did, maybe just like a snippet or so.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, because I have this on a wish list because it's like the art style in this kind of like 30s, 40s black and white cartoon aspect. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Next up for me, Eternal Strands, kind of third-person action game. Looks like, you know, you're battling these huge monsters and creatures in this world, and it looks like you have like telekinetic powers of some sort. Very colorful. That was kind of the first thing that I unlike all these games now, they're very colorful. It's not just kind of drab like it has been, but it looks pretty cool. I couldn't tell if it's like a Souls-like or not, and I haven't really been able to see any write-ups on it. I didn't get a chance to look, but I know there's like a lot of huge monsters they kind of showed during the battle, which is kind of, you know, epitome of that kind of genre.
And this one will be on Game Pass at launch as well.
Yeah, but that looks cool. Mistfall Hunter, speaking of Souls-like, which is a Souls-like, a mix between a Souls-like and an extraction game, which kind of interesting. So maybe give it a try or so. That comes out next year. Actually, I think all of these that I'm talking about, all of these three so far are coming out next year. I don't know if there was a lot that they showed for this year, maybe except for some of the DLC and stuff. But just like I said, I've kind of dabbled in extraction games, so I'll probably give it a whirl. Wheel World, which was previously Ghost Bike from Annapurna Interactive Games. Kind of on this, I guess, like other world, supernatural, like other, like, I don't know if you're dead or like what's going on, but you're on a bicycle and kind of on this kind of open world that you're doing an adventure of some kind. But it looks kind of cool. It looks kind of interesting, cozy-ish, maybe potentially. And that's going to be on Game Pass too. That's I didn't say if it was coming out this year or next year. At least not in this article that I posted, but
IGN's got it coming out in 2025.
Oh, it is 2025. Okay. And then the last one for me, Phasmophobia, which is a game I played on PC. Played a little bit on PC, mostly in virtual reality and VR. Phasmophobia coming to Xbox Series X on October 29th of this year, actually, speaking of games for this year. So it's been a huge, I want to say ghost hunting, more like ghost detecting, I guess, because you're not really hunting the ghosts or things that you're looking at when you're going to these houses, but you're trying to just kind of decipher like what these creatures are, and that kind of like plays out the level for you. So I thought that was kind of interesting. That's coming to the consoles finally, so that's cool. Anything do you guys picked out of this direct?
For me, the Legend of Babu looks really interesting in terms of kind of adventure, but just the art style of it in this, very not necessarily cartoony in the same way like the bicycle game that you were talking about. What is that? The Real World, where Real World feels almost cartoony like Ali Ali World, where this just looks, it's 3D adventure, action adventurist. It may not. It almost reminds me art style wise of the Legend of it was a. I have to go back and think about it. But yeah, I guess it's very kind of Zelda action adventure-y in terms of what it looks like. I'll have to look up what game I'm actually trying to think of here. How about you, GameLogic?
Not a whole lot. I didn't really pay too much attention to this showcase, again, just because I don't follow as much of the console stuff as closely anymore. Of course, right, the likelihood is that lots of these games are coming to PC, and that's the problem, is I'll have to, take time to figure out which ones and when. Just off a quick glance, Eden Zero looked a little interesting, depending on exactly, what the combat mechanic there is, because I'm not sure if it's real-time turn-based or something kind of in between. And Eternal Strands look really interesting, really stylistic. The problem and concern is, we've got Unknown Nine Awakening out now, which was the one game that was like my killer game for the year. That was the most standout, interesting to me in terms of kind of how its gameplay looked, and it's arrived and unfortunately hasn't stuck the landing. So, I have my reservations on my darlings that I see that have really, like, to me, like, super interesting kind of gameplay mechanics that are kind of not treading like the well-worn carpet that some other games do. But
I was going to ask you about that game because I know it was on your list, or it was on your radar. But
yeah, so I've got to temper my expectations, for people trying to do things that are super ambitious. But just from first glance, it did look interesting. But I feel the same out of what I've seen from Eternal Strands as I felt about, say, Kunitsugami, which now I need to get on PC. But that one did stick the landing and fared very well this year. So maybe it'll turn out okay.
So the game I was thinking of was Kenna Bridge of Spirits on PlayStation PS. It was on Epic as well. The other game, Chronos by Bloober Team. Bloober Team just doing the Silent Hill 2, but this is a sci-fi horror game, kind of third-person aspects, both on PC and Xbox, coming out in 2025.
Now, when is Wheel World supposed to be out?
25 as well.
Okay. Well, it's one to keep an eye on. I would be surprised if it arrives on that arrival date unmitigated, given all the stuff that's going on in Annapurna.
Yes.
So,
Yep. Yeah, I think that's... Yes, with Annapurna's changeover and narrowing and layoffs and everything else, I think it'll be interesting to see what that ends up with.
Yeah, so actually, really right now, we don't know who's publishing that, because Interactive was the publishing arm, right? Not the development arm. So I guess maybe
Correct. Yeah. Yep. That's how I read it as well. Because there was that kind of 80s mixtape or whatever it was called from the Xbox showcase the past year or the past summer. Oh, there we go. Thanks, Nate. Yes, calling Babu bootleg Kenna. Yeah, it very much looks like that. But again, I think I don't know that that's a bad thing, right? I think that's a space where there is some approachability for an all ages type of game. So, anything else here, Tao, that you want to highlight or bring back to our attention?
I think it was the last game that they showed, which I must have missed. I think I might have missed the last video, or I don't know if it was sometime during the direct, which is FBC Firebreak, which is in the Control universe. I guess Control / Alan Wake / what was the other game? Quantum. What's the other game from Remedy that they did with one of the Ashmores?
Was that Quantum Break? Was it?
Quantum Break.
Quantum Break. Yep.
So this takes. Yeah, it takes place within the Control or the FBC, the Federal Bureau of Control, their headquarters, where there's some kind of otherworldly invasion force that's coming through. So it's a 3-player co-op shooter. So I couldn't really tell from the trailer though. Is it like a wave-based thing, or is there like you just kind of go? Is it an actual storyline that you're kind of following and just playing? So I don't know. But it looked
yeah, I don't know that was clear yet. I would think it's a little more of a multiplayer-esque experience. Did you get a chance to look at, or have you tried Blindfire? Because it went early access as well, another team shooter.
I did not know.
Okay. Yep, and that was announced there as well, that the early access started last week for Xbox and PC. All right. Yeah, go ahead.
And Wu-Tang Fallen Feathers looks pretty neat too. Of course, the key question here is whether or not it's being described as a Souls-like. It's definitely giving me Souls-like vibes. And if it is, that will of course be a nope for me. But maybe from a difficulty perspective, it's not a Souls-like, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of these here, GameLogIQ, that will end up making their way to PC, as most Xbox things end up doing. Speaking of Xbox things, let's go to our final Xbox-related news story. I think final one. But so the current head of Xbox Game Studio, Alan Hartman, is retiring from the company in November. This article comes from GameIndustry.biz. And a rare veteran of 14 years, Craig Duncan, is going to be taking over as the head of Xbox Game Studios, which includes the Halo Studio, Coalition, Turn 10, Playground, and all the other that fall underneath there as well. Not a huge piece, just the idea of we've seen plenty of turnover within Xbox management as things have shifted, but bringing somebody in from the inside speaks, I think, to some of the stability that they might be trying to maintain versus trying to bring somebody in from externally. And probably I glommed onto this one after spending the week reading through Blizzard's revolving door of company leadership. So any thoughts here, gentlemen?
No, just a quick question. So this is this where, I don't know if Phil Spencer had like probably many positions, but this is where he kind of came from too, right? He was the head of the game studios at one point, Xbox Game Studios.
He was, and so the funny thing is, he was that, and then he flipped over to become head of Xbox. So if you look at Sarah Bond now and Matt Booty, I'm pretty sure, I could be mistaken, I'm pretty sure Sarah has his most recent title before he was promoted to a C-level officer. And I believe that Craig Duncan is now going into a role that used to be Matt Booty's title before he was fleeted up, right, to kind of become formally designated as part of the triumvirate of the GLT, right, between, with Spencer at the top and then Bond as one of the legs of that triangle and Booty as the other.
Yes, I believe so. And this Duncan will report to Booty as it reports in the article as well.
The other thing that I speculate on is I believe, having been involved in like splits like these, I believe because obviously, is it Duncan or Ducan? It says Duncan, but okay.
It probably very well could be No,
it's Duncan.
Yeah, there's an N in there.
Yep.
I was going to make a British joke, and then I decided not to.
The other part that I speculated is that, again, having been involved in similar organizational shuffles like this, obviously the total sum of all of the studios is not listed as the things that are reporting to Duncan. So what I believe is that this is the type of arrangement where there are some studios that will report to Duncan, and the remainder of them still just report directly to Booty.
All right. Well, let's move off of Xbox and move into some Sony-related news, but PC Sony-related. So, GameLogic?
Yeah, so I'll cover this very quickly. This story over on PC Games N by Jamie Horde. Spider-Man 2 PC release date revealed, but Insomniac says no plans for DLC. Marvel Spider-Man 2 was one of 2023's top games, despite it being a year that was stacked with GOTY contenders. However, as with so many of Sony's brilliant first-party single-player games, it has been stuck on PS5 since its launch almost exactly 12 months ago. Insomniac has now finally revealed when the Spider-Man 2 PC release date is arriving. There isn't too much longer to wait. That's great news, but Insomniac has also delivered some bad news too, as many have already feared. No additional story DLC is in the works. What DLC did we get with the first Spider-Man? Just the Black Cat module, right?
Yeah, there were three waves of the Black Cat storyline. So it wasn't a huge, but I think also it was announced relatively shortly after kind of the end of the year. So the fact that we haven't heard anything for 10 months isn't surprising that there's not any DLC coming.
Well, and then, so clearly, I think what is in the ongoing lexicon is right now, with regards to this as being framed as bad news, is that Miles Morales is not being referred to as DLC. But in my mind, that was clearly an expansion of the Spider-Man base, right? In a derivation, a clear branch, right, of that initial IP. And so I don't necessarily know
games. Like even when it came to PC, they were standalone games. They were not bundled together. Sorry to interrupt.
Yes, they weren't bundled together within a single launcher, right? But there were definitely like sales where they were offered for a single combo price. So what I believe this means is that there won't be DLC that'll be like, you have to own Spider-Man 2 in order to play this, right? I don't necessarily know that takes off the table any content, right? Just in terms of like, okay, so maybe you're not going to get DLC in the broader sense of the term, but I don't know necessarily that it takes off entirely the table, that there won't be something that, that'll be added here. But the key thing is, to me, it doesn't take off the table the potential that there will be another standalone expandable like Miles Morales was, like a Gwenpool, not Gwenpool, but like a Spider-Gwen or something like that.
Yeah, I think we expected it to come to PC, and it's nice to have a target date there for people to be able to play what is a really enjoyable third-person action game. So I think one of the interesting things that I have found this week in our news stories is that none of us grabbed on to 2K's announcement of their extraction shooter project Ethos, which was kind of dropped in the middle of the week and opened up for playtesting. So, but that may be more of just what news came across our desk, and also the challenges of launching an extraction shooter or any type of hero shooter after what we saw with Concord as well. So sure, we'll get a chance to cover that as more information comes out about it. But let's move into our final segment in the last 15 minutes here or so, as we move into what else we've been playing over the course of this week. GameLogic, why don't you start us off with your wheel and pedals. I'm assuming your wheel and pedal setup and what you've been playing around it. This is the point where there's dead air for those of you in the non-video podcast, because GameLogic, I think, is queuing up some video.
That I am, and I mistakenly hit the E2KG channel instead of my channel. I always forget how to do this. Okay.
So the first game he's pulling up here is Euro Truck Simulator 2.
Oh, am I on the wrong part of the agenda? Not even pay. No, yes. Yeah, we're talking about Euro Truck Simulator 2. Yes.
I mean, if not, talk about it. We've been killing time.
Unless that's grid. That's really different if it's grid.
It's the slowest version of the. Well, eventually the car comes out of the back of the truck, and then you start driving it.
So yes, I did have a chance to get back into Euro Truck Simulator 2. And so the thing that's going on this week, I think it happened this week because I don't think I talked about it last week, is I finally kind of hit the wall on Call of Duty. I guess it's kind of interesting because we have Black Ops 6 coming out next week. And
yeah, kind of the perfect time to hit a wall if you're gonna take a break for only a week. Yeah.
Well, I know I don't think it's a break for only a week. And it's nothing about Call of Duty. I've had a great time playing. I just kind of, again, with kind of a lot of the things that I'm reorienting around, right, shifting to just PC only for gaming, shifting all of my digital footprint over to the Apple ecosystem. I was kind of playing this week. I was at level like 585, 586. I was like, here we go. I'm going to prestige for the 10th time. And then but I've also stopped I've gotten a bunch of gold wraps for weapons. I stopped attaching, camo to my weapons, stickers and charms and all that kind of stuff. And I just kind of hit a point where I was like, I have a lot of fun playing this. But I think I'm peaked. Like, I'm not going to get any better, And then I'm like, okay, so what am I playing for? Right to experience like new maps, every once in a while. And I've for 5 years I've gone through like shifting paradigms about what I was going to focus on for progression and things like that. And I just kind of hit a point where I was like, I don't think there's really anything else for me to do here. So I just started kind of going back to like some of my older algorithms, right, for how I pick, what I'm going to play. I'm still going to be playing some games as a service stuff. I'm still going to put some time into Destiny 2 and other things, but I think for the most part with Call of Duty, I'm putting that to the side, and World of Warships for that matter. So I started panning around, right, to write my algorithm to come up with things to play. And obviously I started off this year saying, I wanted to spend a lot more time with simulations, and I've done that at various points throughout the year, but haven't really stuck with it. So this was kind of the first game actually in my current rotation of 3 games. Like I said, Euro Truck Simulator, I hooked up my Thrustmaster TMX wheel and pedals to play this with. I can't remember if I've described it on this show. Maybe I've described it somewhere else, but man, first of all, I'm glad I'm not actually a trucker. But man, like doing this in Europe is just completely insane. There's going across the English Channel, there's all these different like weird like ferry systems because trucks don't like drive through the channel. They actually get like on one hand, I've been in a mission in my last round, I took a ferry across, and like there's like very narrow lanes to like line trucks up in the bay to get taken over by a ferry. And you have to think about too, how big and seaworthy does a ferry need to be to take a bunch of semis across? It's just an amazing. This is kind of one of the reasons why I love stuff like this, right? The amazingness of the architecture and engineering and design of vehicular transportation. But in other cases, I've pulled into like a train system where all the trucks like drive onto like sleds and get anchored down, and then they get taken over via train. And I need to do the research on that because does that train go through the channel like in a different section or whatever? But there's obviously a bunch of infrastructure set aside to not have the potential that you have in the U.S. on the East Coast and things like the Monitor Merrimack Tunnel and the Newport Bridge Tunnel and things like that, where like if there's a truck accident in the tunnel's just shut down like for hours and people are stuck. So, but man, like you get some really narrow truck drive, car lanes in here. You get crazy things that you have to maneuver into. There is a bug where when there is an obstruction on the highway, like this game does have accidents that will happen on the highway. They will have medevacs that need to happen where the highway will be shut down while they bring in like a helo to medevac somebody out. And there are bugs where like those accidents don't clear. So you really have, just basically have to like do crazy illegal stuff to maneuver around them. You also have wicked stuff in Britain where like if you miss a turn, like there's literally not a place to get off the highway, potentially for sometimes like 12 miles. So yeah, dealing with all that, I'm still kind of in the early vestiges of going through this. I'm not at the point where I've bought my own truck yet. I think I'm about maybe a third of the way to earning the scratch that I need to for that. But just going through and doing pickup jobs now, transiting. I'm headquartered out on, in Great Britain. So I get a lot of having to go back and forth across the tunnel. But and going through like the incredibly narrow British countryside, where, in a big semi truck. The other thing that's interesting is in Europe, I don't know if it's everywhere, but on a lot of highways, trucks are, I don't know how they do it, because speed limits change as you go through different areas. But there is some kind of way that there's some type of telemetry system where the trucks are speed limited. So it's like, it's almost impossible for you to exceed the speed limit. You can for short periods of time. But the trucks will, something is on the truck to actually, make them, top out right at the legal speed limit. So that's been interesting as well. But yeah, having some fun times, zenning out, as it would be.
Well, I'm glad this is zenning for you, because for me, it is bringing flashbacks of trying to back up a trailer with a pickup truck or a vehicle and trying to get the right angle and figure out which way I'm supposed to turn as I'm watching this video here. So before we go on to your next one, which is grid, so we'll let you pull up that piece. Tao, so after reading through the Blizzard video, the Blizzard book, I played a little bit of Overwatch and thinking it was Halloween, and there's the Junkerton Horde mode that used to come out on Halloween, but it's not there yet this year. But you've been playing some Horde mode or Horde Rush within Fortnite.
Yeah, I had mentioned this, I think, last week when I was talking about the different modes. And even though it had been out, I think, at that time, a week, so it's been a couple weeks now, I think I didn't really try it. I was like, Horde mode, okay, fine. And then I tried it Monday or Tuesday last week, and that's
Are you
pretty
playing by
much all
yourself? Are you playing with your son?
Just by
friends?
myself right now. Actually, he's been asked. Actually, he wants to try it out too. Yeah, I don't know if I think they had this in the past too, I believe, because I think they said they had brought it back for this year.
Yes, it's back. Yes. Yep.
Yeah, so I don't know if it was the same before or not, because I don't think I ever played it back then either. But yeah, I just been playing the heck out of this like all week, basically the rest of the week. Yeah, it's pretty fun. So there's kind of like 5 phases in this, where you start off just at like a static area. You gotta, there's waves of enemies. There's like these purple obelisks that appear, and the enemies come out of that, and you could take those purple obelisks out and stop the rush. But they kind of pop up every few seconds anyways, so you just got to survive. And then you're in this like safe area within the whole map from the storm, so the storm's still all around you, just whatever POI they start you off. And it's, I think, like 3 or 4, maybe even 5 different areas that they kind of go between every time you start. And then you move, so that safe zone starts moving, so you obviously got to stay in the safe zone so you don't take damage. Then you go to another or second kind of just static area where you got, and once again, just hordes of zombies. And there's like a mini boss there, and man, I think it's a woman, is the skin, whatever that comes up, but she has like this minigun, but it's like a laser minigun. So like if you get hit by that, you get shredded pretty quickly, just your health and your shield and everything. So then once you beat that, there's another moving section, and then the final area, static area you get to, there's like a giant, literally a giant boss, like as big as the screen. We have to defeat him But while you're trying to defeat that, there's also those purple obelisks still popping up. So you gotta, you know, you're trying to avoid those guys or kill them or whatever you gotta do, but kill the boss, because at that point the storm starts shrinking. So if you know, obviously it shrinks all the way to nothing, and then you're just dead if you don't if you don't kill the boss at that point, because the storm damage is like pretty. I think I don't know, it takes about like 10 or 20 of your health points away at a time, so you get killed pretty quickly at that point. But it's just really fun. And then like kind of halfway through the week, I kind of found, I'll say cheat, but there's a kind of an easy way to beat the
Let's
boss.
call it a strategy.
Yeah, that's right. Kind of an easy way to beat the boss. So like what I do now, and I saw this guy doing it, I was like, oh, I don't know if he meant to do it on purpose, but you basically before the final phase starts, as the circles, it kind of, as it moves, it kind of shrinks a little bit, and then when it stops, it'll expand back out. So once it stops expanding on that last round, you kind of build off like on the border of where the storm is, and your safe zone. And then as it starts shrinking, you pretty much, I build a little base, and I build up and across, so I'm like over the boss. And as long as none of the minions kind of find where your base, like the start off base that I built, they'll break it, obviously if they're trying to get to you. But if you can get it up fast enough where they don't see you, and you can get up that ramp and everything, you're pretty much safe, and you can just rain down whatever bullets and whatever you have on you at the time. So, and I was hoping and thinking that people would kind of catch on when I'm playing this, but no, they just still like running around like crazy, like little ants, just running away from the boss and running away from the other minions. Like, no, get up high, at least get up high, at least get on. There's some buildings sometimes, depending on when you end up. So get on the, and top of those buildings at the very least. And then he does some attacks that'll like break builds and break any building that's in the way, like almost, it's pretty much instantly. But most of the buildings, for the most part, and most of the areas you stop at are fairly large, so you can kind of just run around, and as long as there's like at least sometimes even just two people like concentrating on the boss, like you could pretty much win, as long as they have kind of like more higher tiered weapons. But yeah, and I don't know what, something just clicked with it. With me, I just been playing the heck out of that. And I probably level up maybe every 2 to 3 games, depending on if there's any. There's like a special quest line too, that you can do for different things, like defeat 100 bosses or whatever, stuff like that. And that gives you a big boost of XP. But even just like once you do all those, like it kind of just runs out. And even then, like every 2 or 3 games, I'll level up. So I don't know, it's pretty fun.
Nice. All right, GameLogic, let's go back to you with another wheel and pedals. Are you playing Grid with wheel and pedals, or are you playing it with a controller?
With a controller. So I mistakenly said Euro Truck Simulator was kind of the first thing I went to when I bounced off Call of Duty. It was actually not. It was actually Grid Legends, and it was because I wanted to pick up something in the rotation that was kind of easy pick up and play for me to get into, which setting up wheel and pedals is not
similar. Yeah.
right.
No.
Although European Truck Simulator and American Truck Simulator are pretty easy to actually get into, but the game itself, but there's some peripheral hookup. But with Grid Legends, I just played with the controller. And like I said, I was looking for like a racing kind of sim light game. And I remembered that in this generation that, when we were all back on consoles, that I had been looking forward to Grid Legends, and I wound up skipping it because it came out, but it didn't necessarily light fire. And I felt like, look, there's Forza and there's Gran Turismo 7. I'm fine with those for now. I can swing back, and now, right, this was the good opportunity to do that. So it's not entirely different than the other grids you've played before. But I think it strips down some of the convolution of where like the campaign had just kind of gotten a little like ridiculous, right, in all the bells and whistles and like all the options and stuff. The other thing that's super interesting is your partner is not completely inept like they have previously been in Grid and like they are in most other racing games. So you do wind up having a partner on your team. But on many occasions, and I've actually have had to crank up the difficulty I play on like the 4th level of difficulty, I think, which is expert. A lot of times, I get a lot of variance to where there are some races I can win at expert, and then there are some races where I like come in kind of almost mid pack, but not quite, still just like in the upper tier, but like 8th or 9th place. And so I go back and forth between expert and hard. But in playing in those modes, like I'm just typically accustomed to your partner being, at the tail end, right, of the entire pack. But my partner's not. Actually, on a couple of occasions, my partner's actually ahead of me. Until I, wind up having to kind of work my way past them. So that's kind of interesting. But yeah, it's I don't have a ton to say about it. It's kind of standard grid fare. It's more sports oriented. But it's purely racing. Unlike I like Forza Horizon, but I sometimes am not super crazy about all of the. I tend not to consume the content of like the speed traps and the drift sequences and all that other kind of stuff. I'm like, I just want to race, and so kind of grid kind of keeps it to that.
Nice. All right, we are just about at our time. Tao, I do have to ask you though. This week is Black Ops 6. Are you picking up are you playing it on Game Pass? Are you picking up the $30 add-on bundle? What's your plan of attack for Black Ops 6?
Yes, I will gladly take up the mantle of Call of Duty back now that GameLogic has fallen off again. But yeah, I'm definitely picking it up. I'm just going to do it through Game Pass. I'm not getting any like the special bundles or anything like that. But yeah, I'm super jazzed about this one. And like I played the beta, like I mentioned a month or so ago. I pretty much played that every day when I had the chance. And yeah, I'm super excited for this, just to see some of the other maps. Like all the maps that they show, I think about 4, maybe 5 maps that they had. Maybe actually there might have been a little bit more, but I didn't play a lot of the other modes. So it'd be interesting to see more of the maps that they have to offer, and even the ones that they had. Like I was fine just playing those 4 or 5 like every time, so it's kind of cool. And playing that, it forced me, unfortunately, to do like domination and hardpoint and some of these other modes that I usually don't do. Hopefully you can, like in past games, you can kind of pick and choose the modes like you used to. But the one that I really did like was the that one. What was it, like the VIP type mode? I forgot. I can't remember what it was called. But yeah, that one was really cool and really interesting. So I definitely added that to my the modes that I play besides just regular deathmatch. So I'm very excited.
Nice. Well, next week I've been dabbling in a variety of Steam Next Fest games. 2 of them actually come out this coming week with Verballs, which kind of plays like a Ratchet and Clank a little bit, and I'll talk more about that because it comes out on the 22nd. And then on the 24th, Windblown comes out, and Windblown is by Motion Twin, the developers of Dead Cells. And so this is kind of an isometric aspect there as well. But so that's on my radar for the coming week. Tao, anything? We talked about Tao already. So GameLogIQ, anything on your radar for the coming week?
Not as of yet. I'll continue playing a lot of the stuff that I'm continuing to play. One thing about your comment about the extraction shooters sooner before, but there's a few that are out now. That may have been the reason why nobody paid as much attention to the Take-Two one. I know I just had it at my fingertips, but now I forget. I can't find it. But there's one new one out on Steam and one new one out on Epic as well that I've been meaning to pull down the Epic one. But yeah, there's a few out here that are sucking up people's attention. But yeah, I don't have anything specific. I may get back to Spider-Man on the Steam Deck to play in handheld mode. So that's kind of lingering out there on my radar, but we'll see.
Great. And Nate in the chat brings up Romancing Saga 2 comes out this coming week as well, a JRPG in the Saga series. So we're getting into that in the next couple of weeks here. There's lots of games releasing, trying to get in before the holiday season. So gentlemen,
that Grid, the one on Epic you were talking about?
Yeah. What was the name of it again? Something
Off the Grid.
Yeah, Off the Grid, and then the other one is Polaris.
Yes, and Polaris is one that I played a little bit in the Steam Next Fest demos as well. So, yep. All right, guys, that will wrap us up for episode 360. Thanks for everybody who joined us in the chat, and Nate and Hero Down Under. Appreciate the comments and the conversation as we've been going through. GameLogIQ and Townmaster, always a pleasure to have you here. Any other final thoughts before we head into the week? All right. So we will be back with you next week for episode 361. Looks like GameLogIQ, you are going to be on the helm for hosting, and when we are back around with you next week. So thanks for everybody who is watching or listening. We appreciate your time with us, because we appreciate our time together. And so hopefully that carries over into what we put out into the world each and every week for you and for us. So for myself, DBQ Hams, GameLogIQ, and Townmaster, this has been episode 360 of the Enough to Keep Going podcast. So until next time, play the games you love those you play with, and be kind to yourself. Good night, everybody.